Now, the ongoing war in West Asia between Israel and Hamas militants has turned into a massive humanitarian crisis. 1 month on, voices across the globe continue to call for an immediate ceasefire, while demanding immediate release of hostages. In the United States, Amnesty International hosted a demonstration outside the White House protesting for a ceasefire in the war. The non-governmental organization placed a mass of fake body bags meant to represent the dead here.
We organised this demonstration to bring attention to the loss of life that is happening today in Gaza. After the war crime that Hamas committed on October 7th, we have seen more than 11,000 Gazans die, 5,000 children. This demonstration is to bring home to President Biden the fact that he's not doing enough to stop the violence in Gaza.
Roses were then laid over the fake body bags while protesters held signs that read, "Let Gaza's kids grow." There was another demonstration happening in America's capital. Demonstrators who wore black skirts reading "Ceasefire Now" gathered outside the Democratic National Committee headquarters. It's an area near the U.S. Capitol building. Video of the demonstration posted on social media showed officers pushing protesters who'd huddled together, chanting, "Let us live." According to reports, to disperse demonstrators, riot gear police used pepper spray, fired projectiles containing chemical irritants, and made arrests. While in San Francisco, where world leaders are gathering for the Apex Summit, pro-Palestinian protesters took to the streets to call for a ceasefire. About 500 people marched from downtown to the Merchant Exchange Club, where the American President Joe Biden was attending a fundraising event alongside Vice President Kamala Harris and California Governor Gavin Newsom. During the demonstration, there was a brief confrontation between protesters and the police as well, when the crowd tried to enter an intersection blocked by law enforcement.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
In the Philippines' capital, Manila, more than 100 pro-Palestinian Filipino protesters clashed with police in front of the U.S. Embassy. Police tried to stop the protesters using riot shields but were outnumbered by almost 200 protesters until they reached the front of the U.S. Embassy.
Israel is being funded by the United States. The bombs being dropped on Gaza come from the United States. The bullets used on Palestinians come from the United States. The drones used on Palestinians come from the United States. The U.S. has an overwhelming responsibility for the humanitarian catastrophe that is happening now in Gaza. And the U.S. has not called for any kind of meaningful ceasefire that would prevent the carnage that we are seeing.
While in the British capital, demonstrators waved Palestinian flags as British members of the parliament held a vote on a ceasefire in Gaza. Protesters outside the Palace of Westminster called on MPs to represent them in calling for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict.
I'm here today for the sake of humanity, for the sake of dignity that is still left in the world, and empathy for our brothers and sisters in Gaza, for the sake of doing good in the world, because I refuse to let people die and do nothing about it. And I think everyone here today feels that and feels a deep sense of empathy and love that just isn't being shown in our government at all.
In Jordan's Amman, nearly 300 Jordanians gathered near the U.S. Embassy to protest against the war in Gaza. The protesters raised banners against what they described as the United States' role in the war, and they condemned the Israeli raid on the Al-Shifa hospital.
Hospitals are a red line in international rights. The fact that they found no one to stop them, they entered the hospital, raided it, and committed massacres. A patient, regardless of who he is, should have protection. Children are not protected. Women are not protected.
The families of the Israelis being held hostage by Hamas in the Gaza Strip launched the second day out of the 5-day march from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem to demand the government does not much more to secure their release. Holding up pictures of their loved ones and waving Israeli flags, hundreds of protesters marched alongside traffic on the outskirts of Tel Aviv.
I am the grandmother of Gali, this lovely girl, 13 years old, and she kidnapped in the Hamas in Gaza. And I make this march for 5 days to Jerusalem to make the effort to get her back home. We need her home, and quickly and now, and not tomorrow, but not other day, just now.
Friends and family members of the roughly 240 people taken hostage by Hamas will gather at the Knesset to demand that Israeli and international authorities put more effort into securing the release of the hostages.
The purpose is to bring the awareness about the hostages, to make sure this is the first priority for all the Israeli goals. Make sure the government keep this as the first goal in order to make sure they will be back as soon as possible. And also for the international organizations, especially the UN and the Red Cross, to make sure that they will come and visit the Israeli hostages and to know what is the situation, because we don't know who is alive, who is wounded, who is healthy, and then I'm sure they can do much more in order to make sure this will happen, to go there and visit them.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.